Welcome to another build time lapse. Since it is October, I wanted to do something a little bit more spooky. So let me show you the process of building this witch haunted forest. To start, we're going to be working on the witch since she is the center of the build. I use some voxel spheres and then blend balls to blend out her torso, and then I start working on some leg and arm shapes. I found this shape extremely difficult to work in, as it's kind of a static pose, and I always struggle with that quite a lot, getting the proportions correct. Honestly, even after working on it for a long time and trying over 8 different poses, I still didn't really settle on one that I liked. But I was on a time restraint, so I had to move on from this section of the build. One thing I ended up doing was, after placing the head on, I actually took a little break and decided to work on some pumpkins instead. For the pumpkins, I just create some different sized spheres and then create some ridges on those and smooth them out. I think the shape turned out pretty alright for the size of them. Then I put some stems in and start coloring them. I go with some different twisty stems and color them with different shades of orange. Then I come back to the witch after having cooled off a little bit and taken a break. I put her arms out in a powerful stance, as I want her to look like she's controlling the cauldron. Speaking of the cauldron, we're just going to make a sphere, cut that in half, and then create some legs on it to make it look a little bit more cauldron-y. Then, to cover up all of my mistakes on the body, I'm going to be doing a skirt and cloak on the witch. Using the curve command to create some different lines, and then filling that in with the spline. Honestly, I struggled quite a lot getting this clothing correct, and I definitely should have went back over and done some smoothing by hand to get shapes that were a lot better and more advanced, and of course, smoother. I definitely could have done a lot better on this clothing, but I learned a lot and will definitely improve for the next time. Now it's time to fill our cauldron with some green magical sludge and start coloring the clothing of the witch. I go with some purple and then darker gray colors for that. Then I work on her hands, which are very challenging, and I end up revising these a little bit later in the video. Now we add one more skirt, color that in, and do a little bit of shading on her roughly smoothed out cloak. Once that's done, it's time to color her skin and have some hair on her. I go for some wild, curly hair, as if it's almost electrified by the magic and just going all crazy. I go with some white hair and then use some circles to guide myself while building a witch's hat. I put a nice purple band around that to match her shirt and a yellow buckle. Now it's time for the fun part, the haunted trees. I'm using a lot of voxel commands here to create spheres that are going all the way up and branches in different directions. I want some super twisty, haunted, spooky trees here. So I look up some reference art online of different versions of haunted trees, and I follow this. I want them to be twisted around each other and dead, so they don't have any leaves, but they have these vines hanging from them. The branches are sort of sticking off in all different directions, and it's almost kind of ugly, but it somehow works. I absolutely love how these trees turned out. Once the shape is all in, it's time to work on the shading. So I'm going with some darker colors in the shadowy areas, and then accenting with some lighter colors on top, like spruce planks and powdered concrete. Then for the main color, I'm going with some oak wood. I decided not to go for a darker shade because I do want these trees to stand out quite a lot and kind of shine in the moonlight. I love how these turned out. I think they are a fantastic asset to our forest. Although it was difficult to get the scale right, and these trees actually go from Y level 10 all the way up to world height, so they could not possibly be any more taller if I tried. Now it's time for our details, now that the main portions of our build are in place. We're going to be starting with this simple skull that we are going to then move to our cauldron to add a bodysuit. I want it to look like this witch has sort of conjured up this skeleton, and he's crawling out of the potion that she has just created in the cauldron. So I look up some reference art of skeletons online so I can get the correct amount of ribs in place and sort of get a general idea of what the bones should look like, in terms of the shoulder blades, wrist bones, stuff like that that I wasn't so familiar with before. Once that's done, I move back to the trees where we are doing some super twisty roots on these. I want them to be long and twisting around different things. It makes them so much more scary if the trees look like they could grab you. I love the effect that this gives, and we end up even coloring them a little bit later on in the video. Now that that's done, we can move on to some details in the trees. Like for example, this owl organic. It's simply 2 spheres stacked on top of each other, and then I added wings, a tail, beak, and feet in terms of shaping. Then I shade it with some different brown colors. I just love this owl sitting there watching over everyone. Then it's time to work on the terrain. I use GoBrush to add some simple terrain shapes, and then a path and some other brown colors around. I also paste in some grass and some boulders a little later on to add some color into all of this brown. Not too much though, we're not supposed to have a lot of color. Then for the other tree, we're going to be doing another organic, this time a snake. I smoothed this out and end up going with some green and yellow colors in this, just to make him stand out against this tree. I love the look of this. Now it's time for the witch's feet to be paid attention to. I give her some creepy, curly, pointy witch shoes, and I think it's definitely fitting with her outfit. Then we need some details on the cauldron. It takes me a while to figure out what I want to do in terms of the witch's magic to make her look like she's in motion. I like what I did with the bubbles here, but I ended up getting rid of those weird kind of streams of magic and replacing them with some simpler ones. We also add some skull-shaped bubbles and some candles for her to be sort of drawing her power from. And, of course, we need some potion bottles, one tipped over and one straight up to paste in next to her. Then, for the final detail, we're going to be adding some gravestones. I drew some inspiration from a grave that is near me that is from the 1800s. It's got some really creepy old gravestones, and I absolutely love the look of it. So, I pasted some of those shapes in around here. And that is it. The build is complete. Thank you so much for watching this video. I absolutely loved creating this build, and although it was very challenging, it was a lot of fun. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye!